Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for this webinar. My name is Kelty Monroe, and I'm the Marketing Strategist at Industrial Brand. We're a brand strategy and consulting firm led by Ben Garfinkel and Mark Bussey, who are also your hosts for this morning's webinar. We're going to get started in a moment. We know everyone is busy, so we'll stick to our promise to finish within an hour. Just before we start, I want to mention that in the chat window, I'll be sharing some relevant links along the way. And also, if you have questions, type them in, and we'll answer as many of them as we can at the end. Okay, we're ready to go. Ben, over to you.
Thanks, Kelty. I'm sure we're all familiar with firms that are named after their founders. Sometimes the legacy of these folks lives on beyond them, while other times those left in the organization struggle to see the point in a seemingly irrelevant name. The purpose of this webinar is to look at this, then leave you with 2 or 3 things that help convince you branding is worth doing, and share some tools you can apply in your own firm. In addition to today's webinar, you can also check out our article specifically about the names on the door, and there's a link in the chat window now.
Hi, everybody. This is Mark. We've been providing brand strategy and communication design to a myriad of clients for, I guess 2 decades now, with an increasing focus on architecture, engineering, and constructors the past 5 years or so. You may even recognize, if you work in the industry, some of the logos on screen, which represent pretty much a small sample of the brands we've worked with, and there's at least as many new brands we've launched that aren't there now. We approach today's topic guided by a few assumptions of the challenges and realities professional service firms are facing these days. Firms are changing, they're growing, adding expertise and capabilities. People, especially principals and staff, are coming and going. Hiring is getting harder than ever. There's interestingly been fewer decreasing grads year on end since 2008, which is curious and creates challenges for HR. And talent retention is increasingly difficult. All of these things bring marketing and branding into focus. Technology is changing the game. We're getting democratized technology and commoditized practices. Fees are experiencing downward pressure, as we've all experienced, and importantly, the procurement process has changed, with buyers becoming more informed and demanding. Now, all of this makes branding and marketing not just proposal writing and RFP responses, which is where a lot of our AEC clients spend their marketing time, more important than ever. We find brands that are thriving are those that are moving past traditional marketing habits and becoming more proactive about sending bold messages about values, personality, ideology, and culture into the marketplace in a meaningful and authentic way.
So here are some of the topics we're going to address today. In pursuit of why, or even if the names on the door matter, we'll look at how they're connected to the culture of the organization, how to assess your brand efforts, getting people at all levels of the organization to buy in, the difference between refreshing and rebranding, how to bring authenticity to your brand, and we'll leave you with some tools you can use to get things rolling yourself.
I think, yeah, excellent. So we like to think of brand as the cultural, operational, and directional hub of an organization. But really, it's the connections between these where the real difference lies from one firm to another. For instance, the connections between a firm to its founders and the legacy or mythology and underlying spirit and foundation that creates may or may not be strong. Or the connections between a firm to its external audiences, be they clients, partners, vendors, prospects, etc., which can have a huge impact on reputation. And certainly the connection between a firm to its staff, i.e. the leadership and the staff to each other, which leads to culture. When thinking about branding, we want you to look at not the names on the door and not think about how can you can't look at the names on the door and not think about these connections. And while sometimes it may indeed be time for a new brand, the names on the door may not be the problem at all with the brand.
Here's a great and fairly typical example, actually. This is a 60-year-old firm founded in 1954. As tradition dictated at the time, it was named after the founding partners. Typically, a decade later, they added a partner, and they added his name to the door. And so it goes, and it goes on, as partners are added and the name is modified over time. Finally, I think after getting tired of changing letterheads, in 2008, the name turned into an acronym, and it's certainly one way to sidestep the naming conundrum. This is a firm where the current outgoing partners never even added their own last names to the firm name. So the current next generation of leadership of the firm, the guys that are going to take it into, the next couple, decades, is twice removed from the name that they currently have. Sure, yeah, there's equity in the name, but the incoming partners don't identify with it, and they don't see it working to represent the firm's future. So in this case, it was the fit was deemed more important than the equity in the name, and so earlier this year, we rebranded the firm as Ratio to help align the firm's recent work, the culture, and the partners and staff move forward to what they aspire to be. This actually reminds me of something one of our clients once said. Being a partner in a firm with no cultural legacy from the founders, whose names are still on the door, is like going sightseeing with a corpse. It'd be much easier to get where you're going without them. So can we leave our names on the door if we want? Sure. Yes, we can. But you need to be prepared to let go of those legacy names when it makes sense to do so.
Exactly. We often tell clients, go ahead, leave the names on the door of your firm if you have a strong internal culture and position in your local market or whatever market you do business. But if there's nothing particularly unique about your firm, the partners are no longer brand heroes or leaders, or if the plan is to extend into other markets where the name has little or perhaps no meaning at all, then it may very well be time to consider a new name or identity, or at least look at evolving the existing brand positioning and messaging.
So assessment and ROI. One of the things that we're often asked by our clients is, how do we assess the value of our brand? Or what value is there in spending money on brand updates? Unless you seek out and have a clear understanding of what you have, you're never really going to know its true value. So here, let's put it another way. Imagine I'm holding this $5 bill. How much do you think this is worth right now? $5, right?
Or for our U.S. Friends, $4.95 maybe? No,
like
$5. No, $5.05.
So how about now? It's torn. What's half a $5 bill worth? Is it worth $2.50? Would you give me $2.50 for a half a $5 bill? I doubt it.
Hey, Ben, did you tear a $5 bill legal tender in half? Isn't that illegal?
You don't tell anybody, I won't. The point is, you need all of it for it to be worth something. One half of your brand is what you think of it. To complete it and have a brand of real value, you have to know what other people think. This challenges our assumptions. By digging, doing research, and finding out internally and externally what people think, you will find the other half of the $5 bill. And, the nice incidental benefit of doing this process and looking at the value is you get to find out what you need to make effective decisions, and clients and staff feel like they're being taken seriously and listened to.
Not to mention clients who appreciate being asked for input in those circumstances as well.
Well, absolutely. It's certainly part of the brand to be seen as somebody who cares enough to ask. And ask often. And that's the point. Brand value is not a fixed moment in time. Opinions change, attitudes shift. Keep asking. Always want to be making sure that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing to move our brand forward. There's a lot of strategies, tools, and exercises to establish brand awareness, brand value, etc. Some examples are CRM tools, website data analysis, client interviews, internal staff surveys, and all sorts of other measurement tools are important. Here's a little story, actually. As we were conducting an objective third-party look into our client, one of our clients, we heard some pretty frank things. We often do, and we actually were doing this for a client, as mentioned. And the question that we asked was, were there an upcoming project that is suitable for this firm? What are the reasons that would prevent you from awarding it to this client? The answer that came back was, funny you should ask that. There actually is a project coming up, and we're not awarding it to them. Here's why. And we got a full report as to the reason why they weren't going to be awarding this great project that was coming up. When we were reporting this back to our client, in amongst a document with a whole bunch of responses, they somehow managed to pick this out right away and literally acted on it. They went back to that client, took ownership of the issue that they had seen, fixed the issue, turned it around, and ultimately did win that huge piece of business that they originally weren't going to get. So if you're only going to seek out this information about your brand when you're rebranding, you may never actually get the chance to make real discoveries and advancements with your brand along the way. So point is, you have to do this regularly. Don't wait. It's as much about branding as it is about business development.
That's awesome, Ben. We don't have enough time today really to delve deeply into our design process or and how we establish, present, and collaborate on the various stages of deep branding project. Although, if you'd like to talk about that offline, please do contact us. But one issue that is often the most contentious and frankly really important to clients is consensus, decision making. We're commonly asked how do we achieve this by new clients, and have developed many strategies and tactics over the years. Sometimes, by the way, we have many stakeholders, many senior members of the leadership team, often partners with their own perspective, and getting them to agree on anything when you have 25 people who are partners in a firm can be a challenge. Consensus for us is really more about a weighted majority after gathering all the points of view from different stakeholders to get a sense of overall direction. Our task is to distill this research into something meaningful that the project owners can sign off on, even if a few still don't agree. Ultimately, someone needs to make the decision to proceed, or frankly, the project stalls. It's important to meaningfully engage with leadership as early and as often as possible so they get used to the idea and make it easier for them to get their commitment, as any brand initiative relies on everyone's support, involvement, and commitment once decisions are agreed upon. Certainly ask lots of questions, but make sure that they are well-crafted questions designed to elicit useful information. Then look for themes and patterns leading to logical conclusions based on the information gathered to show where the group already agrees, and start noticing the gaps. During a brand process, we always try to avoid the question, so what do you think? That's a dangerous question. It's human nature, but that's a dangerous one. And we prefer lines of inquiry aimed at uncovering motivations and emotions, often asking, why do you think that? Or, so what? What next? Or how do you want your audience to feel? We also try to avoid any big reveals after work is too polished and too much time and resources have been spent. Instead, sharing findings in phases so clients know what we're doing, where we're going, and they feel part of the process. This makes it a more collaborative process, generates immediate feedback, and very importantly, especially in the AEC sector, it creates amongst partners a sense of ownership. It is their brand that they are bringing to life. We are the facilitators. We also work hard to test understanding and clarity on language along the way by using visual models such as style tiles, mood boards, etc. for early design concepts, developing a few options to ensure we have buy-in on a specific direction before moving on. There's a useful article on our website if you'd like to know more about how we tackle this problem. I think Kelty's posting a link for you in the chat window now.
I just wanted to share with you guys an example of a mood board that we recently used, or a version of it, to test the brand elements and associated language alignment with early type, colors, words, and images. So a lot of that strategy and a lot of those things that happen early on in the process at some point start to turn into into visuals. And for example, clients maybe will say to us they want to emphasize simplicity or elegance or be friendly. But have completely different ideas about what that looks like in visual language. So our lesson here is test as you go, and it's certainly a part of the consensus process so that we can reduce subjectivity from that process.
Yeah, that can always be fun. Let's pause for a second here, actually. Make sure that we're clear about the difference between a brand refresh and a rebrand, and the top reasons a company might consider either. For most organizations, brand becomes a priority after a triggering event, such as a merger or a departure or even arrival of a partner, which can also have the most challenging, these can also be the most challenging branding exercises for those involved. Expanding into new markets or regions, or a decision to emphasize a specialty can require refined branding identity and messaging to better reflect the position, the merits, talents, and offering of a firm. Other factors such as talent acquisition and retention challenges with fewer grads, as I mentioned earlier, combined with the quirky millennials entering the workforce these days and their needs being very different, compared to us old codgers, as well as other HR issues. Yeah, whatever. Other HR issues can also suggest the need for branding. Technology changes, internal cultural issues, even the changing sales environment, these all can require a fresh brand in order for a firm to thrive. Corporate images go stale, and if a brand begins to look sloppy or sends the wrong message, this can even be just in terms of how a website functions, while mobile becomes more important in these sectors. And if it doesn't work, it says something about your practice. Remember, these are multiple audiences judging you by your brand. Well, then it's time to take action. Perhaps a refresh is all that's required to revitalize the brand, but if research reveals that your firm is known for what it used to be, not what it aims to be, then in our opinion, it might be time for a rebrand, which might even include a totally new name, to be frank.
So we wanted to share an example with you. And earlier we mentioned that brands that thrive are most often those that are proactive, use bold messages, express values, personality, beliefs, and culture. In our description today, we promised to talk about revitalizing the Tire brand. So the dictionary defines vitality as the state of being strong and active, filled with energy. So what's the difference, and how do you know when a brand is tired and where to take it? Let's look at a couple of examples. So there's two here. One is, they're both actually in the AEC sector. And generally, a brand refresh is about correcting and adjusting an otherwise functional brand. This was the case with Task, which is the example on the top here. We calibrated the marketing and communication materials and brand assets without undertaking major brand strategy changes. The identity itself is still quite recognizable as Task. And, one might ask, how did we decide that this was the right choice? And, for us, we find that, often there's a disconnect between the external perceptions and the realities. And this needs to be confirmed with research. Here, there was a high internal satisfaction and operational functionality, but really it was the identity itself that needed to catch up with, the output of the firm and the caliber of the work operationally and otherwise. There was strong equity in the name, the identity itself existed, and there were satisfied staff and clients. However, functional issues with the identity, such as consistency, color, and then other technical details needed to be addressed. One example of a technical detail might be readability on signage or contrast, or possibly the way that a logo is organized may not be suitable anymore for display on mobile devices. We may need to create versions of a logo that are more compact horizontally, so that we aren't losing too much in the display of a logo on smaller screens. In the case of Frankel architecture, there was plenty of evidence to suggest that we keep the core name. Even though it was on the table, there were major strategic revisions needed to meet the gaps that had been revealed in the analytical phase here. Enough here that with the changes that we needed to make, we considered this a rebranding. So here, we had identifiable and fundamental changes in the company since the last branding check-in and effort. So the company had changed. There was a significant gap between where we were today and where they wanted to go. And what we had today wasn't going to suit their aspirations. And although there were a lot of positives, they were contending with negative and outdated perceptions, some delivery, service, and staff retention issues as well. There are definitely other factors, such as whether the company has undergone a merger or acquisition, or if we have cultural issues that are coming together from different organizations. Partnership changes can be a trigger. Focus or specialty change, expansion. In this case, it was really a lot about a succession plan, and that was one of the reasons why we looked at this as a rebranding exercise. However, and this is really important, the purpose behind either path is not to throw away everything and start again as a first course of action. Our objective really here is to see what makes sense to salvage and retain and build on it. Refresh before rebrand is sort of what we're trying to do here. We do want to keep as much equity as possible, and that's where the strategy comes in. So the question about do we rebrand or do we refresh doesn't need to be answered right away. What we need to do is go into the process of investigation first with an open mind, see what's needed, see where it might go, and then make those decisions along the way. So unless you're standing there with all of the research done already and understand exactly what's needed, all you have is an assumption that needs to be tested when you're embarking on a process like this.
I suspect, and I hope that everybody listening today has some experience with marketing and branding and understands that this example was merely a visual example of a logo. Brand is much deeper, much more about messaging, positioning, storytelling, and communications than just logos. But anyway, it was a good example. So one of the things I wanted to ask everyone is anyone else getting sick of the term authenticity? Isn't it totally overused? It's become almost meaningless. I must admit it's to me, I'm as bored of it as I am as the word branding itself, to be honest. But the point we'd like you to consider at this point is that what you do as an organization is table stakes when it comes to this. When you take that off the table, what do you have? What's left? Process, like the process that your firm employs? Meh. You could argue that most firms, and as a, having we're a professional services firm ourselves, and having to do our own marketing, talking about our process really is not an effective way of expressing who we are or why we do what we do. This is where the power lies. This is where the authenticity lives. An authentic brand is one that communicates in a meaningful way, especially because these millennials we were talking about for a second, they care deeply about belonging to something that is authentic, a community, an organization that keeps its promises and stands for something. The difference lies in culture, and successful brands proved clarity and focus for everyone in the firm so that they can work together toward a common purpose. I'm sure there are a few of you who feel that perhaps your brand is already quite self-aware and has a strong reputation. Perhaps your leadership group has done some soul searching with fancy vision and mission development work, and that's great. That is really helpful stuff. And we don't feel that there's always a need for deep dive brand strategy or identity design. Fair enough, but how well is your story defined? How well is it understood and articulated both internally and externally? Is your firm's messaging compelling? Is it meaningful? Do you have a toolkit that guarantees consistent application and expression of your brand message at all times? Because if you do not, you need a brand work.
The brand essence is your brand, and it's your brand in writing. Actually, a lot of the reasons why there are actually so many assumptions about how great your brand is or the value of your brand in an organization, especially at the leadership level, is because it isn't written. It's not articulated. And it's really what's behind your logo and the words that you use to communicate your firm's intentions that's important. It's your follow-through. If every person in the company doesn't know what the company's aspirations are and the directions that they need to go to get there, likely, it's just not going to happen. We're not going to get there. Another thing is to think about is if the people inside the organization don't understand the brand, you can't expect those outside of it to do either. And that's really one of the key things in terms of looking at what those differences are to getting started on the path to really, really strong brand. You also can't brand without an expression of the why of the company, as Mark mentioned. It's the brand purpose. This is the core idea. You can take the profit motive out of the equation. We're talking about purpose beyond profit, and this is what unites everybody and all the business messages and activities. Everything feeds into and out of this. Strategically, management needs this because it provides the clarity and focus for the leadership of the firm. This is a lot to ask of individuals, especially at the staff level in firms. This diagram that we've put here to show you is an example of an articulation of a brand essence and a brand purpose, which here is the core idea that unites us and all of the things that support that. The values are inherently part of the brand. Personality is the things that we hope that people say about us and believe about us, the reasons to believe are the things that we need to actually do in order to ensure that people say what we want them or think what we want them to think about us. So how do we make this practical for staff, for people, so that they can go about their daily routines and responsibilities? It's actually not very practical as it is right here. Once one of our clients even describes this whole thing as kind of consultancy, in the sense that it takes a lot of work to cook up, but it isn't easily understood or applied. So we extract a set of brand filters and simplified brand actions. It's how companies steer individual project and business decisions and actions. It's complex, but how employees understand it needs to be very, very simple. So the actions guide behaviors, and filters, which are a version of actions, help make decisions about whether something should be included in the brand universe. So here's an example of some brand actions, which, for example, brand actions can be used to define, unify, and align corporate culture. They can deliver a consistent internal and external experience, and they measure progress and success. Literally, you can port these brand actions or versions of them into performance evaluations, and those evaluations can contribute to a firm's understanding of how the firm brand is progressing along the trajectory of its aspirations. Here's a good example. So in an architectural engineering dynamic, in a typical sense, there's an architect very often has ownership over a project in a prime versus sub-consulting relationship. But working together is the ideal. So what happens when you form a company that promises full integration of these two disciplines, puts them in the same space, and on a collaborative basis? How does the organization deal with the operational and cultural challenges and needs for the firm to promise more than just having these two disciplines, but actually delivering on something that's better than the two of those things separately? To deliver on removing the individual, professional, and other biases that come into play, and have these two focus on a superior offering and end result for the client. And that's the root of this. Is if that's our promise, we need to figure out operationally and otherwise what it is that we need to do to deliver on that as a brand strength. Another example, looking inward, is from a recruitment perspective. So it applies here. If you're promising architectural talent that they can have a career working closer with engineers in a better way than traditionally non-integrated consulting, sub-consultant relationships, and it's only lip service, and all they're doing is working in the same room in the same office, eventually the firm's reputation will just be that we're not really an integrated firm the way that we would want people to believe, and word gets out, and it's going to strip away that differentiation that we have, both from a client perspective and also from attracting top talent who are going to go off and find a job in an architectural practice that just promises them the opportunity to do great design. And what we're talking about, all of this is about the root of authenticity, what we just talked about a little bit a few minutes ago. It's how we deliver on that authenticity.
There's a comment from one of our folks today, and I totally agree with him. He says the word passion is suffering as well, I think. Yes, sir, you are correct. I am so tired of the word passion. I really am. That's true. Okay. A brand is really only ever as good as its application, and consistency is crucial to brand success. We've seen this for 20-something years. It's when you deviate, you lose track of version control and application and all of these things where brand starts to unravel and become flawed and ineffective. We always recommend our clients employ a brand asset management tool to keep vital assets in one central location to ensure only the correct version, be they graphic elements or boilerplate language or those brand actions, for instance, and all of the things that build the internal brand, the North Star that drives all sales, communications, marketing, and brand kind of related activities are ever used. Our version of this is called managed brand. And we've been using this for years now. It's our third version, I think. Many of our clients use this online system not only to ensure brand consistency, but as a tool for training their staff. Not only just marketing staff, but actually it can be configured as a terrific way for people to figure out who they work for and why it matters, and the language, that the shared vernacular that they use. I'm not saying you guys should use our system. I'm just saying that really folks who are really good at this, good at brand, they centralize and control their brand assets and keep track of it. As we wind up our short time with you today, we want to share a few tips with you as you may be considering a brand project in your company, especially as it relates to implementing or launching a new or even revitalized brand, a refresh as it were. Always start with internal and external stakeholder surveys. I really mean this. And I have to tell you, in the years we've been doing this in the AEC space, I have a hard time thinking of maybe more than one or two times that sitting with a new client or a prospect, I've said, have you ever, or when's the last time you did a survey with your clients, with your vendors, with your staff? Most of the time, the answer is never. And I'm talking about big firms, 100+ employees. They'll be like, yeah, we haven't done it. That's where brand lives. That's where you do that, you know where you stand. Otherwise, you'll never know the true value of your brand. You'll never find the other half of the $5 bill. So consider also the advantage of using an objective external consultants for this to gain better results. If you have decided that your brand needs a refresh, not just, beyond just a logo tweak and, or something like this, but you need to revitalize your brand. Here are just a few things I want you to consider. Consider the role of testimonials, client testimonials, vendor testimonials, even staff, and the power of video. People are underutilizing video in brand messaging. Add that to your existing brand materials, and you'll add personality and authenticity that didn't exist before. Determine also what areas your firm could maybe claim specialization in and benefit from that. Consider the role. Don't say no to all of the other work, necessarily. Although that's definitely what comes with specialization. You say, nope, we do this, not that. But also consider the role of knowledge. If your partners are the ones who have all of the key knowledge in their brains, how can you extract that, systematize that, and make that part of the culture, embed that, inculcate that into the culture of your firm? There's tools like intranets. There's a fabulous technology by Christopher Parsons down in San Francisco. His company's called Knowledge Architecture. Ben and I will be at the KA Connect conference next week, actually, with Christopher. Those tools can really help you. They also have brand asset management tools as part of this. And that's where brand can start to increase health and consistency in application and help revitalize it from the inside. I know that a lot of you are probably still quite nervous about social media. I know that the older architects and engineers we speak to often they roll their eyes, they cringe, they just don't understand. But there is an overwhelming amount of data supporting social media when done correctly, when controlled, when structured in a powerful way, in an authentic way, and used well, not just as self-promotion, as a way to invigorate a brand, to increase engagement, and to build client awareness, and frankly, to bring you better talent. And examine tools such as integrated business intelligence software, lead generation software tools, CRMs, marketing automation. I mean, we here use a business intelligence platform called InsideView. There's for a while we tried one called Data.com. We use a CRM called Salesforce. I'm sure most of you have heard of. We use a marketing automation tool called Acton, which and all of these things are great. If you've been to our website, you may have seen ads as you surf the web elsewhere. That's a remarketing campaign. We use LinkedIn quite frequently. These are all things that can be used to revigorate and revitalize a brand from the inside when you don't have to rebrand the whole damn thing. Can I just add something there, Mark?
Please. Actually, the interesting thing is that in order to use those tools really, really effectively, you have to know your brand. You have to know
Correct.
who you are, and those are great tools to start launching your brand and creating a reputation online into an audience that may be a little bit less expected than the ones that in AEC typically are a lot closer to home.
Absolutely. Write a book. I've been told to write a book. We've been told to write a book. We've told our clients to write a book. One of our clients did write a book. It's not easy. I'm not going to pretend it is. But man, if you want to get on top of being known as a category leader, a thought leader, it doesn't, it doesn't take that much. You stake a claim, have an opinion, write it, self-publish it if you must. Just the idea of being brave enough to publish a strong opinion and share openly expertise and show off what you do well can really help build strength inside a brand. But of course, there's going to be situations where your firm needs a redo. They need a new whatever name, identity, platform, website, the whole toolkit. They need a rebrand. The messaging is lost. Massive triggering events have occurred. So that's fine. When these things would happen, there's a few things we do with our clients. One of the things we love at Exercise, those of you who are in marketing positions and would wonder, what would it be like to work with these guys? What would they do? We do this discovery session workflow that we've developed over the years, and we have we tailor it to context, obviously. But one of the things we always do is we challenge stakeholders to write headlines of tomorrow. And this is the idea that in 5 years, if there was PR, organic PR about your firm, what would be the headline? And in 10 years, what would be the headline then? If we can find a gap between those two positions and today, we can actually create a trajectory and steer towards that as we start working on language and positioning. Also, very important, establish a team of internal brand advocates. Don't ask everybody for an opinion. Don't make everybody part of a committee, or frankly, we'll decline the work. We won't work with you. But if you can create a team that helps guide that process, makes those decisions, and then actually are the advocates to gain traction during a launch period and create momentum. You can do launch initiatives creatively and imaginatively inside. We've done games and contests and art projects where we got one office at one firm competing with another office at another firm to do a new brand oriented expression of an art project. That was a lot of fun. Anyway, this really helps, and make sure that there's someone in charge. Please try to not to succumb to the urge to just get on with it. That's unhealthy. Slow down and do it right. Make sure internal stakeholders understand what has happened and brought you to this point and what it means for them before launching anything publicly that's not quite refined and ready to be embraced and lived up to. Don't make false promises. And the adage, act, measure, learn, really does apply to brand health. Once you've actually gone through the rebrand process, follow up with partners, follow up with stakeholders, do more surveying, collect more data, even go back to clients, measure their perceptions of the brand refresh, and adjust where opportunities present themselves. Fine tune it. And as said earlier, the use of brand asset management tools can't be overstated. It's very helpful in maintaining consistency in messaging and application over time. Lastly, start with a simple assessment of your brand health and get multiple opinions on this. You can use this worksheet that Kelty's going to share with you in the what's the window, chat window. There's a jump start form that we've created that allows you to sort of answer some simple questions and it'll bring you to a link where you can download a worksheet and get a quick sense of where you're at. And frankly, if you do this, contact us. We'll give you a free assessment. We'll give you a consultation and tell you what we think. Are you in a refresh mode, a rebrand mode, or what might this look like in the future for you?
Thanks, Mark. Everybody, thank you for joining us today. This has been wonderful. We've got some questions. We'd love for anybody who wishes to throw in a few more as well. Please do. Why don't we just address questions now as they come?
Okay, thanks, Mark and Ben. We do have some questions, and I'll be fielding more. We have a little bit of time left. The first one we have is, how do you get companies to recognize that a brand update is required, even when business is thriving?
Oh, well, I'm gonna go back to the survey. I'm gonna going to the market itself and comparing that data to internal stakeholders can often reveal a problem in a sort of rational, fact-based way that can really, if you can tie it to the bottom line and say people, like that moment in time with the large architecture firm where we discovered that there was a very large, to be, I don't want to talk on a stool, but we're talking about millions of dollars, when we discovered they were not going to gain business because they were not living up to their brand promises. That turned into a bottom line ROI, revenue generating, hit them where it hurts moment. And brand was part of that answer, because they were making promises outwardly that they were one thing and they were behaving in a different way. And it just reinforced for any doubters that, we have a problem where our message externally is not aligning with our actions.
Also, sorry, go ahead, Mark. Keep going.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say that if it may also be a factor of when the last time you actually looked really hard at your brand. If it's very close to when it is that you've last done a branding exercise and you feel like you're on course, and your business is doing very well, it may be that you're on the way. But if it's been quite a while since you've looked at your brand and you're still doing well, there may be other factors. There may be other forces at play here with respect to the market. A really strong market is just going to create hopefully really good business. And what happens when the downturn happens very suddenly is that those with strong brands may be able to soldier through that, whereas if it's not a strong brand and it was propped up by the market and the market turns, well, there's a problem.
For sure.
Thanks, Ben and Mark. A few more questions. The next one is, can you talk a little bit about how the name Ratio came to be? It's such a step away from a partner name approach. I like it.
Right. Well,
I just read them, folks.
I'm gonna let Ben answer that a little bit, but I will tell you sort of a broad sort of 35,000 foot view of this type of naming convention. There are any of you who work inside the professional services sector know that last names, the trend became, oh my God, that partner's dead. Now it's an acronym, and oh my God, the acronym means nothing. And now I'm a new partner, and my last name's not even a letter in the acronym. That whole thing, moving towards there's an architecture firm in Canada that we like. We didn't name it. We would have loved to. They're good friends of ours. We've worked with them before, but they're called Dialogue. And the idea of a word, of a name, and positioning language, oftentimes you can through tagline and positioning language, you can really tell the story. It creates sort of layers of meaning, and it's this invitation to start a conversation. We really like that. We really actually think that is a sustainable sort of approach to naming that can carry a firm forward for many, many years without getting caught up in that whole thing. But I wanted to say before I hand it to Ben, it's emotional. It's emotional because when you start defining meaning, and words are emotional things, and when you say this word means that, and it's going to stand for this, and it's going to be reinforced by our brand tenets and brand filters and actions and language and positioning, and all this messaging rolls out of this one word. You really need to be sharp and stay on and know and believe and validate and be really, really careful about the words you choose.
Yeah, it's it is an emotional thing. It's sometimes even difficult for us to very clearly identify whether or not a company's name should change, and I mean, it might even be physically painful for some people in leadership of firms that have had a name for 60 years or even 5 years to envision a name change. And in the case of Ratio, to really address this question, the name change was probably a little bit easier to understand because this is a firm that was 60 years old, and about 40 years ago, the two the partners that are leaving today were brought on, and they didn't change the names. Their names weren't on the list of names on that door. And so the new guys, the two young guys that are taking over the firm and taking into the future today, already see that the work that they are doing now, their ideas, their attitudes, their processes, all of these things, they're not represented by any of the names, and the acronym of those names isn't isn't really evocative of anything that they stand for. It's not really communicating anything for them. And so when we started to take a look at all of that, we realized that, yes, okay, this is a firm with 60 years of work and equity, and people know who they are to some degree, but Ratio as a name, and we went through a lot of names, and naming is probably the subject of an entirely separate webinar for us, which might be a really great next one, is that the name fits with their ideals. The name fits with how they see themselves. And maybe the name's a little bit uncomfortable at first, but I can tell you it's been about 6 months, and the name is fitting like a glove. And once the feedback starts coming in, and people say, "Wow, it's a great name, I love it," and all of those other kinds of things, it really starts to take on a life of its own. And that invigoration that we talked about earlier, that's what's behind this. And I hope that answers the question.
Thanks, Ben. We do have time for a few more questions. Next one is, the brand essence process looks very comprehensive. How long does it normally take to get from point A to point B?
Every prospect asks us this question. Some of you listening may be considering working with us, so let's get this out of the way now. Okay. That's like asking, how much does this process cost? And here's the question. I didn't come up with this, and some of you have heard this before. It's like asking, how much is a car? It really depends. Are you talking about a big car, a small car, a luxury car, economy car? There's 1,000 options that could change that. So too with brand process. I'll tell you the factors that really come into play, though. How committed are the key stakeholders that are in that brand steering committee? How informed and experienced are they? What resources are available so that we can step in and really produce the content? Because content is always the thing that really hinders this sort of thing. Content and decision making are the two big things. We can help with both. I will say that in a best case scenario where we have a marketing manager with a few senior stakeholders who are believers, who have committed to this process, who have allocated budget, who are keenly, attentively scheduling this in their time, not going to be vanishing for 4 weeks of vacation, can't do anything without that guy's opinion, that sort of situation. We have done a brand strategy platform with essence and filters and actions and messaging and identity in as little as 90 days. But that, I'm telling you, that is totally rare. 6 months is realistic for a process where we can give it the time to percolate, to step away, to do the research, to do what we call phase zero. We didn't talk about phase zero today. I think that would be another great webinar in the future. But when we really set a foundation and scope the project out and set up some walls that we know we can bang into, and then sort of delineate who's responsible for whom, so that there are no assumptions made, and we know what happens if suddenly we have one of those moments where we drift and we're not getting commitment and decisions and content and what have you. However, it should be said that you're right. Thank you for that question. This can be a comprehensive, long, and emotional, as I said, process. This can take 9 months, 12 months. A couple of times it's taken us, a year and a half. But I'm talking about a year and a half to really, that's with vacations and Christmas and a retreat and discovery sessions and multiple deliverables and stages and layering on the production and application and what have you. And then a comprehensive brand rollout that includes a launch campaign and all of that production, all of the collateral and the new website and the blah, 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 and all that stuff that goes into it. So yeah, 6 months to a year is pretty good place to start. If you're a huge firm with lots of politics and lots of players and lots of baggage, it could take over a year. Is that a fair answer, Ben?
Yeah, and when you if you are going into it without assumptions, be prepared for that to change. If you decide that you want to have a new name, the things that are involved in that process can add 2 months or more.
Oh, sure. Trademarking alone. Yeah, you bet.
Securing the rights to the names. If maybe you want a URL or something that somebody else owns, and that's super critical.
Everything stops.
Factors. Interestingly, though, sometimes engagements start with a deadline.
That's right.
We might have a client come to us and say, "Hey, listen, We know we need a new brand refresh or a brand rebranding or something like that because we're merging or we are moving into new premises in 8 months or at this time, and they're trying to key all of this work to a specific time frame, and that's possible to do as well. It definitely shapes some of the things that happen along the way. Usually we're pretty successful at doing that. But the other thing to keep in mind, and oftentimes this gets lost in the process, is that when you have a new identity, new visual language, new name, or any of those other kinds of things, and even if it's just a refreshing, it's a golden opportunity to get back out into the market with a message.
Correct.
With your message, with your hopefully improved message.
Your biz dev people have a new excuse to call everybody.
Absolutely. And so planning that launch is as important as everything else because you can extend the launch to 6 months or a year of activity in the market in terms of marketing or a launch party, an event. You want to make sure there's enough time to bring the employees up to speed and have them fully bought in, and also making sure that doesn't bump into holidays. Don't launch your brand on December 15th.
Mark and Ben, we have a question here about mood boards. Are emotional mood boards still the best way to portray brand motivation and feelings, as well as identify core values and characteristics?
Well, sure. You know what? Again, it depends a little bit on the context and the experience of the client. I'll tell you one of the things that we've done over the last few years. We have found the consensus building thing when you switch from strategy and messaging to visuals. That's a big switch. I mean, as I think Ben was explaining, when someone says, "Oh, I want simplicity," it's a tenet of our ideology. We all strive for simplicity. Well, what does that look like in visual language once you start applying graphic design? So mood boards, definitely can be a facilitation tool. Designers, if any of you have worked with designers, you know that they're all taught to use that. Now, some better than others. One of the things we've learned that if having dealt with engineers and construction leaders and architects who are used to seeing swatches and tiles, that's what one of the term used as this article on our website about style tiles. When we're doing web, for instance, once we've gotten even through brand identity and have a platform, when we're doing web, I don't know if you've been involved in a website design and development project, but if you get those wireframes and you have, the passionate visual the partner who self-identifies as an aesthete who has incredible taste, and you're showing them wireframes that are devoid of any meaning and any style and any color and anything, it's very hard for them to relate to that. And you can talk about user experience all day long. They're going to glaze over. We've had that, and you just lose them. So much like with brand and when you're doing collaterals and things, functional mock-ups that aren't a style tile is more like a bunch of, it's kind of like showing swatches of carpet and paint samples and the tile for the door, for the entryway, and all of these things that they're used to seeing, to kind of feel to demonstrate mood and feeling and tie that back to the tenets of, so that one of the great things about those brand actions, all that we also call filters, is that you can create a set of criteria that function as a reference point for every step of the way. Like something we've all agreed to, that if it looks like this, if it feels like that, then it's suitable for inclusion in the brand universe. If it's not, do it again or rethink it or have a very good reason why. So that's where mood boards and style tiles and these sort of things can become really useful, because you can say, well, wait a second, we agreed that this was important. There's the language that described it. This is a visual that is an expression of this. Our own empathy and intuition and experience as design professionals as well as strategists tell us that this is how this is best expressed. Where's the differential? Help us explain it. And it becomes again a collaborative process. We're not going to jam anything down anyone's throat. Certainly not when you're talking about firms that have a creative component themselves, like architectures who have design embedded in their systems.
Definitely about removing subjectivity as much as possible.
As much as possible.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mark and Ben. We do have a few more questions, but we're running out of time. One of the questions that came in would take a bit of time to answer and gives me a great idea for our next webinar, and that is where we see the biggest changes in marketing for AEC firms in the next 5 years.
Oh, that's a big one.
So stay.
That's an hour right there. Oh boy.
Exactly. That's kind of what I thought. So it's a great suggestion. But thank you everyone for your time, and we hope we've given you some things to think about. If you want to go through this webinar again or share it, we'll be posting a capture on our site tomorrow. And look for more upcoming webinars soon. We have an idea, and I think I just got buy-in from Mark and Ben based on that. So
Yeah.
we'll be seeing you soon.
But please do email us with any questions if they come up later as you guys think about this. And it's been a pleasure. We're looking forward to the next one for sure.
Thanks,
Great.
everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.